how did that lead then to you originally getting started on YouTube?
So YouTube's one of these funny sort of accidents. It might seem like a really smart choice. I don't know if it was. I was a MySpace kid. I in my like early bands and musical careers and stuff would just record songs at home, put them on MySpace, reach out to like venues and promoters and try to get shows and stuff. But MySpace was on the decline and YouTube was on the incline. And I was into YouTubers anyway. But I always sort of saw myself as one of these musicians on YouTube. And it was just the smartest platform at the time to be releasing music, pursuing a career in the music industry. But it very quickly became about covers and reaching a new audience through covers. And I did covers on my YouTube channel once a week, every Sunday for 5 or 6 years. And I just sort of saw that as one, if I don't make a really strict rule out of this, I won't continue at a pace that is going to get me anywhere. And equally too, as I sort of saw them as the equivalent of like shows or like performing at an open mic night. It's just another opportunity to be on a stage and reaching people. And that's just sort of all it was. I didn't really like think about it all that deeply. It was just fun. It was just a fun thing to do.
What was the sort of early success with that? Because it blew up like pretty huge.
It's yeah, it's funny that you say that because at a certain point it did, and it may have looked like an overnight success, especially in, I forget when Wrecking Ball came out, but that was my first video or cover to exceed 1 million views, which happened really, really quickly. But you know, there were years before that where I would just cover songs by the Early November and the Swellers and, you know, like smaller artists that I was really into. And those covers were more for me than for, I don't know, trying to reach a huge audience or blow up on the internet or whatever. But yeah, there were a few, you know, I covered Paramore and they shared that on their Facebook page. I covered Sleeping with Sirens, and Kellen sort of got in touch, and he's still like a really close friend. Um, but yeah, the Wrecking Ball cover, I forget what year that came out, 2012, 2013, 2014 maybe. But yeah, Miley Cyrus dropped that song. And it was all about being the first one to get to a big song. The earlier you got to it, the more you could sort of capitalize off the trending algorithms. And it happened to come out in sort of early September or whatever. And I remember, you know, I filmed that on September 10th or 11th because my birthday is September 12th. And I was editing on Final Cut for 8 or 9 hours so that I could upload it as soon as possible. And it just happened to be my birthday. So, yeah, I remember that really clearly, like, either canceling or not caring about any sort of birthday plans. It was like, it's just about this video today, which ended up being a good decision, but you never know. There were all sorts of songs that I thought were going to be huge successes and weren't. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just try again next week, I guess.
Did it feel like a huge success when you got there?
It did. I mean, like every cover and every song felt like a huge success. It was never easy. Like it was like all-nighters of like recording and editing audio and then editing video and all this sort of stuff and trying to get like an online audience engaged to use social media cleverly. Tumblr was huge at the time for promoting like covers and YouTube content and stuff. It was a lot of work, but it was fun.
How quickly then did you go from being like, I'm going to cover the Early November because I love it, to I'm going to cover this pop chart song because it's going to be massive?
I did them both at the same time. There was no, I mean, it was like, it would have been inauthentic to pivot, I guess. It was just like, I'm just, yeah, going to do what feels fun. And some of them are really going to take off and some of them aren't, but they're songs that I love. They're important to me and they might be important to somebody else too. It's the thing that I've really connected with and found importance in, is that, you know, As It Is isn't a huge band, but the majority of my favorite bands also aren't huge bands, and you can have a real impact on people without being a stadium or an arena level band. We're a sort of mid-level band if we want to get granular about it, but so many of my favorite bands have been even smaller than where we're at now. And that doesn't mean that they haven't like shaped my life or gotten lyrics or artwork tattooed on me and stuff. Like that's real. That's the power of art. It's not about the superficial success.
Was YouTube very different back then to how it is now? Because
Oh
you've
my
like
gosh.
recently uploaded something.
Yeah. No, YouTube was completely different. I think the thing that attracted me to YouTube and like YouTubers back in the day was that it was almost a counterculture, sort of like the alternative music scene. It was a place where weirdos like me didn't fit in with the normies that we all like went to school with or had to go to work with. You did it because it was fun and you sort of found your community there. But YouTube and social media now is just mainstream culture, and it's been totally like reshaped by that. And there are still sort of small corners of it where weird little communities like ours find each other. But back then, sort of pre-2010, it was just a place for fucking weirdos. And I loved it for that reason. It felt really special. What was really funny about when I started going to YouTube gatherings, which is a thing that I and we, the YouTube community, did, was we like met up in parks in London and stuff, and we would sort of meet fellow YouTubers and people that watched our videos and stuff. And I would bring an acoustic guitar. Well, actually, before I used to do that, I would go without a guitar, and people would bring guitars and ukuleles, and they would cover songs. And from what I remember, they were sort of like Adele covers and Bruno Mars covers, and people would watch and sing along, but they'd be wearing fucking My Chem shirts and Fall Out Boy shirts, and I'm like, there's like a fundamental disconnect here, right? Is these people grew up listening to the same music I did. I bet if I bring a guitar and I cover, I don't know, I'm Not Okay or something, there might be an audience for that here. And it turned out that there was. So I started doing that, and sort of like made a name for myself in that community in person at those gatherings and stuff. And that sort of became Summer in the City. I know you just had Mark Walker on the show, who I love with my whole heart. Yeah, I started going to Summer in the City in either 2012 or 2013, maybe even earlier. I don't remember. But the band got to perform at Summer in the City 2014. Still one of the biggest shows we ever played, and we hadn't even released a record yet. But YouTube then was different and really special. I feel really lucky and really privileged that I got to experience that. Yeah.
You were there at the start.
Yeah.
What was the decision then to leave YouTube? Because at the point where you left, you had like 500,000 subscribers.
Right. Ben and I have talked a lot about this recently.
It's a wild number, man.
Yeah, it's really difficult for people in the modern age to understand why you would step away from an audience and a platform like that. But where the industry was at the time, maybe not the sort of mainstream pop industry, but certainly the alternative music industry, is that me coming from a background in making YouTube videos was a real problem for As It Is to be taken seriously by anyone. And that is speaking for both the community and the industry, is journalists and promoters and all sorts of other people in the industry did not take As It Is very seriously because I came from a background in making YouTube videos. So that is one of the reasons that I stepped away, because I had pursued YouTube. First it was MySpace, then it was YouTube, to try to attain this career in the music industry, to be that rock star. Like I said, when I was 10 or 12, that's what I wanted to do. And here I am in my early 20s. That opportunity is here, and I need to give that 110%. And I wanted nothing to distract me. What also helped me to decide is that I was still trying to make covers, do sort of punk goes pop style covers of rock covers of pop songs. And I was working on one. There was a song called Rude by a band called Magic that was really big at the time. And it went, why you gotta be so rude? And I was working on a cover of that for my YouTube channel at exactly the same time that the band was writing Never Happy Ever After. So it was 2014. And musically, I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of potential in the bones of the song. And that song became Dial Tones. We completely repurposed the musical bedrock of a cover I was going to do for a song that nobody really remembers or talks about anymore. And released the biggest song that the band has ever made. And it's really funny because you can, so it, following the chorus of that song, it goes, marry that girl, marry her anyway. And you can still hear it in coming out of the chorus of Dial Tones where it goes, da, 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 da. So that's marry that girl. And that was there for the purpose of the cover. It was like locking in with the melody and the top line. That was another reason that I decided I don't know if I should be doing these two things at the same time. As it is the thing I feel more passionately about. I need to give everything, all my best ideas, every idea to this band's debut record. And it turned out that in doing so, we would kind of end up writing the band's biggest song.
Playing devil's advocate to that,
Please.
you wouldn't have wrote an incredible song in theory then if you weren't trying to cover something. So was there not the thought that like maybe I should keep doing these covers because they lead to really awesome material for us?
And it's cool and interesting that you say that because I kept doing that in moments that,
Okay.
you know, I would sort of take the top line or the just basic fundamental idea of a pop song and write a cover that I knew I wasn't going to release. Hey Rachel was one of those. I don't even remember what song that I was like covering at the time, but it produced results for me, possibly just because it was something that I knew really, really well and had been doing for years, or possibly just because that it got myself out of my own way a little bit. It just gave me a sort of like head start to sort of build a song around an already existing idea and then just change it later down the line.
That's a really cool way to approach doing it. I mean, talking about the stigma, because that's a really good reason for someone to, and sensible reason for someone to be like, I had to move away from it. Do you think, because we talked about this a bit with Mark, because there's still a stigma now for influencers that try to break it in music. Do you think that if you'd stayed with it, Dial Tones was such a good song in its own right that people would have had to ignore that you're a YouTuber? Because no one could listen to that song, regardless of whether you're a YouTuber or not, and be like, it's not a sick fucking song.
Sure.
Especially like for a pop punk band in the slam dunk scene at that time. Like, did that not just give credibility?
Maybe, perhaps. I guess I don't know. I mean, the other thing to speak to too is just that, you know, in 2014, it was easier to still be making YouTube videos. The band was writing our debut record, but we only played 40 shows. But in the following year, in 2015, we played 175 shows. And we were busy working on our next record as well. It is pretty hard to do anything extracurricular when you're moving at that pace and you're in strange places that you've never been to. It was our first time seeing a bunch of these cities like Tokyo and Sydney and Toronto. And to try to make space or time for YouTube videos just wasn't possible, at least not for me. Maybe somebody who's just better at multitasking, but that's not who I am.
That's a lot that's going on.